morning and welcome to Theology Thursdays with me, Pastor Cara.
And me, Pastor Trudy.
And we are so glad you could join us. We begin today with our reading from Luke chapter 24.
Beginning with verse 13. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had been happening. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you are walking along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place here in these days?" Jesus asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in word and deed before God and all people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all of this, it's the third day since these things took place. And moreover, some women from our group astounded us. They were at the tomb earlier this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things, and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them all the things about himself in all the scriptures.
As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened to them on the road, and how he had made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Here ends our reading.
So, Cara, what caught your attention or imagination while you were reading or listening?
Or listening. This is one of my favorite stories, and lately it has been one that has encompassed a lot over the last year. With a lot of synod stuff, we've been talking about this journeying, and how do we journey, and how do we walk or accompany with people. And so as Jesus shows up on the road, walking with them, talking with them, I love that he doesn't just assume or make known that he knows the whole story. He's already aware of what's going on because he's Jesus. And I love the part where they're like, "Well, and these women astounded us."
We have a tendency to do that to people, don't we?
Right, we astound people. And then there's the breaking of the bread, and that seems to be very poignant right now because we aren't doing communion, and so those things stick out to me. How about you? What struck your imagination or stuck out to you?
What I love about this piece is, again, that journeying piece. the author of Luke is the same author as Acts. And in both Luke and Acts, there's this journeying where Jesus is constantly walking and going places and meeting people. And Jesus is doing it again, right? He walks up on a couple of his disciples and he asks them, "What are you guys talking about?" As if he doesn't know. And then, when they tell him, he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're talking about me, but you're talking about all the things, all of your hopes and all of your dreams and how they were crushed. But then these women astounded them. And then these people then some of the men went to the tomb and they were like, you're right, it's empty, but where's Jesus?" And like, there's this great mystery involved in it. And it's very Luke. It's very Luke, which is one of the things I love, because we've been talking a lot about Matthew and a little bit about John together. So Luke is a new one for us. But Luke is all about the journey. And so it's perfect that Jesus meets Cleopas, and I think the other one's name is Simon, on the journey. And he journeys with them and he listens to them. He listens to their story. He listens to their side of the resurrection and what it's like as a disciple to be on that side of the resurrection, because they heard that Jesus wasn't there, but they don't know what to do with that information.
Right.
And Jesus just listens to them.
Yeah. I like the fact that when we talk about them not knowing what to do with that information, how much like that is, because there's so much, like, because of my scientific mind and the fact that I want to be able to like have all the answers, I want to know more about what he said to them on the road, right? He opened the scriptures to us. What does that even mean? And how do we take that, right? Please tell me more. Like, can I have a book that just has all of what he opened the scriptures in and saying to them in that moment? But that's one of the beauties of the biblical text in the first place, is we're able to ask those mysterious questions that talk about how do we journey together and what does accompaniment look like and how does Jesus teach us those things in the midst of not only these two who are walking on the road, but also us as we walk through our own journeys. And so that's a point of interest for me, that when we talk about this journeying piece, especially with Luke, that we're talking about how. We open that up for ourselves and how the word is living right now, which is cool. So
not only living, but like is with us.
Right. Yeah.
Holding it, like walking with us on the road on our faith journey. Like, I just love that vision almost of that we get in Luke.
Yeah. I also, the second part of the passage is where they get to the village and it seems like Jesus is going to keep walking. And I'm the type of person who's like, well, what if he had kept walking? What would that mean? And it is a question I kind of ponder, like, if they hadn't been hospitable and said, please stay with us, it's almost dark. If they hadn't offered for him to stay, would he have kept walking? And what would that have looked like, and how would the story be different? And it doesn't really matter, but this is where my brain goes.
I know I've said this before. It's fun to speculate.
Right? What would the two have gone back to Jerusalem? I mean, the whole point is when they recognize him in the breaking of the bread, they then go back to Jerusalem where they just came from to tell the disciples what they've seen, so that they can share it, so that it becomes a testimony in and of itself. And I love the breaking of the bread piece, but that's because of what I believe about communion and how integral communion is to us gathering together, and how that is important to us being together connected. And it's a way in which to remember how much I love that and how much I'm looking forward to that when we can get back to it.
Yeah, that's where we get to encounter Christ, right? Like, there's not often that we meet Jesus on a road like Simon and Cleopas did here in the text, right? It's not often that happens. But we do encounter Christ in the breaking of the bread and in the drinking of the wine, when we are gathered together, and can do that. And I think I've been listening to a lot of my parishioners who have said, I really miss church, but what I really miss is communion. I really miss having that encounter with God. And I get that right now. We're in a fasting period, mostly 90% because of the pandemic, maybe more than 90%. But we're in a fasting period, and I think we're feeling that.
Yeah. I also love the fact that it's about the relationship. It's not just about seeing. Like, in some ways in my head, I'm like, Jesus could just appear and be like, I'm Jesus, peace out. But that's not how that works, right? It's not just about seeing Jesus, but it's knowing that he's the Messiah, and it's about the fact that he takes the time to walk with us. And that again reminds us of the relationship of God that we have, like, that it's a God that, these two men who are walking are in an essence depressed and lost and trying to figure out what to do now, because this is not the way that they thought it was going to go. And how often in our lives do we end up in that place where we're like, this is not the way it was supposed to be. This is not the way. And that's not even just to talk about the pandemic, but people who have been divorced often say, this isn't the way it was supposed to be, or who've lost children or family members. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. And so how often do we end in that same spot that these two men are? And we need to hear those words that Jesus doesn't just show up, but that he walks with us, and he opens the scriptures to us, and he opens ways in which we are in relationship with one another, so that we can, even if we can't hug, we can be together and know who we are. It's again that finding the sheep that is lost piece, which is amazing, and I love
that it's always about God coming, searching for us, and God coming to us when we most need God's grace and love and encounter, and that's when God shows up.
Yeah.
I
love that part of the parts of my Bible ask the question that these two men aren't seen anywhere else in Luke's gospel, and they show up here. And so, one of the questions I would have for people at home is, why do you think that these two show up now? And what would be the purpose of having two new people show up who are considered disciples, who are in the midst of what they're going through? Because we're not seeing two disciples we know really well. We're seeing new people.
Right.
And maybe that's a way in which to speak to new people in our culture and new people as ourselves, who live thousands of years later. I don't know.
I guess another question that would be good for people at home to discuss is, how has God journeyed with you or appeared to you when you most needed that grace and love and tenderness and relationship? Just like these two disciples are receiving.
Yeah. The question I would also ask is, when are those points in your lives where you've felt that burning in your heart, right? Not heartburn. Very different things. but that times when, the way I've often phrased it is that you just know without any, like, that God is with you. An example I would have of that is the first time I was in clinical pastoral education, and in the ICU, there was this family, and this person who had such strong faith. Like, she was embodying Christ in a way that I had never seen before, but I knew in that moment and in that way that as her family was surrounding her, that God was there, and I just saw it, and it was, like, and in that moment, everything kind of made sense. Like, it wasn't a matter of, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. It was, even though this is the way things are, and this is really hard, God's there. So where are those places in your lives where you've just felt that burning in your heart, that you know that God is with you, and that He's supporting you? Yeah, it's such a good thing.
Yeah. And those are good. I think they're good discussions to have with our loved ones, especially right now, to have these deep faith conversations that are very personal, but to open up and to share right now would be, this is a good time for it.
Well, and to encourage each other that if there's somebody who has helped open, like in the breaking of the bread, opened those eyes for you and helped you to recognize that, take a moment to tell them. I always talk about my grandma as being the one who helped me with my faith and opened doors that I couldn't have opened by myself.
Right.
And so part of me is like, I need to call my grandma and tell her. Maybe she'll see my theology on Thursday, and then I can just be passive aggressive about it and not tell her. But I will actually call her and tell her.
I encourage a phone call to grandma. I always encourage phone calls to grandma.
All good.
All good.
So, well, we thank you for all of you joining us. If you hear banging in the background, that's just my children.
It happens. It's okay. Yes, thank you guys so much for joining us for this Theology Thursday and to talk about how God joins with us and journeys with us.
If you want to leave in the comments any of the answers to our questions or things you've thought about, please do. We would love to hear from all of you about how the road to Emmaus speaks in your life and in your heart.
Or how it captures your imagination or attention.
Or as Trudy would say, how it captures your imagination or your attention. Awesome. Well, to close out, amen for all of you, and we love you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us. Bye.